So, Aldrin, the whole issue, I mean, part of what Cheryl Carolus has been testifying about has been about giving us a glimpse into the workings of state-owned enterprises, in particular the one where she was involved, SAA, and a lot of the testimony focusing on the route between Johannesburg and Mumbai, India. And that's important, isn't it?
Yeah, and actually towards the end of her testimony, she also testifies that if you look at the destruction of the various SOEs, it's quite clear that Gigaba was central to that destruction. And that's the evidence that she's given here. But in the clip that you played earlier on as well, where she speaks about how the minister would go out and discredit the board and speak about the board's incompetence, for instance, but during meetings with the board express his complete confidence in the board. There was also a part during the early morning testimony where she spoke about his advisor, Mahlangu, who would say that the minister is not happy about this and that. But when the minister was then called into a meeting with Mahlangu there, the minister then changed his tune. Now, this is according to her version, and the minister then said that I never said that, and this Mr. Mahlangu was then chastised for doing that, speaking out of turn. But here's the other thing, though. If you listen to the closing remarks of Cheryl Carolus, which is really important, it is an impassioned plea, and I'm going to bring Aaron Bates into this conversation right now. An impassioned plea, not only speaking to the work of the Commission, but also the witnesses who have been intimidated. We've heard this before. We've heard from even Gwede Mantashe when he was appearing before the Commission as well, that the witnesses must be protected.
Yes, and she was very critical about attacks on the inquiry itself and has given her unending support for the work that it's doing. She really did, toward the end of her testimony, credit the inquiry, credit the current president for stirring up optimism about South African economy, but then also speaking to the ongoing issues that come and stem from state capture. Eskom, for example, today announcing load shedding. She said, I want my country back. She said, they took it from us in the past. We're not going to let them take it from us in the future. And she addressed Zondo on perhaps coming back at a later stage and providing more evidence. And she said, we need to lance this boil, this sickness of corruption and abuse, and in that you have my full support. So a really impassioned plea at the end there, not only to support the work of the inquiry, but against people who are criticizing and giving veiled threats, not very veiled threats, in fact, she said, of violence against witnesses and the Commission itself.
Important person who has been implicated yet again, it is former Minister Malusi Gigaba. She goes on as far as to say that he lied to Parliament when he wrote to the Speaker of Parliament at the time, Max Sisulu, and saying that the financial statement of SAA was not in order, where he had the financial statement for over a month.
Yes, and there Zondo was very careful to ensure that it was in fact what happened, that we have it on good authority and on evidence, that Gigaba did mislead the Speaker of Parliament in a letter he wrote that was publicized or mentioned in a Business Day article. And this all happens in a week in September of 2012, where SAA is waiting for this letter of guarantee from government, ensuring them that if they hit the skids financially in the new financial year, they have some buffer, they have some backup from government. On the Tuesday, Carolus says she gets the assurances from Gigaba that that letter is ready and coming, when in fact on documentation the inquiry has now obtained that letter had not been signed by the then Minister of Finance or his DG, and it would have been Praveen Gordhan and Lungisa Fuzile at the time. They only signed the letter on the Wednesday. It arrived at the fax machine of the Department of Public Enterprises in Gigaba's office on the Thursday morning, and that same morning they look at the Business Day front page, and there is an article to say that the then Public Enterprises Minister has written to the Speaker to say the financials are not ready and therefore the annual general meeting has been postponed. We know that that is absolutely a lie, because Gigaba had written a letter on the 31st of August indicating that he'd seen the final audited financials, he was happy with them. And so this is incredibly serious. Zondo is aware of that, and that's why he was so careful to check, did Gigaba in fact actually do this, and did he know at the time he wrote to the Speaker that in fact the financials were secure?
And Advocate Hofmeyer even going as far as saying that this is indeed Gigaba's signature, and at the end of the letter he says that the financial statement will be submitted today. That's the instruction that he has given to the board. But let's speak about the board members then really getting angry at this. One of the board members even saying that we are dealing with a hostile shareholder. and all of them wanting to resign in mass, at least 7 of them wanting to resign in mass.
Yes, it sounds like it moved up from 7 to 9, and Carolus herself, for a while, she says, was in a way quite tolerant of Gigaba because politicians will be politicians. And so if Gigaba in one forum was being very critical of the board and not in another, well, that's the nature of the beast. But by this point, when he'd in fact lied, not only to her about this letter of guarantee, but then also to the Speaker of the National Assembly and the House of Parliament, she'd reached the end of the road. And so she and several board members who had by that point already indicated to her they were at the end of their tether decided collectively to resign. But she indicated they tried to do so quite responsibly because SAA was so critical a state company and that they didn't want to publicly, interrogate and criticize the minister because it would have consequences for jobs, for people down the value chain. And she spoke as well about the importance of SAA. You know, for some people maybe this may all just be a bit of a hullabaloo, but the importance here is not only about this as a state-owned entity or, as Carolus said, a microcosm of state capture. It's also about the jobs down the food chain, people producing salads that go on airplanes, people who restore the in-flight entertainment equipment. There are tangible consequences for the decisions of a minister like that, lying to the national speaker, all the way down to the person who's putting olives in a salad for an airplane.
Fast forward, what we know the most contentious issue, of course, during the tenure of this board was the Mumbai route as well as advertising in the New Age. Fast forward a couple of weeks, I'm not too sure whether it's a couple of weeks or a couple of months, comes in Dudumieni. But Dudumieni, as we know, was part of the previous board as well.
So there was no weeks or months here. She just moved from one board into the other. Of course, the distinction is that they were now under a different minister. So Carolus was head of the board, chair of the board when there was a transition from Hogan to Gigaba. She contrasted the two as being like chalk and cheese in terms of their approach to governance. And in fact, she said on Gigaba when she was asked by Zondo to elaborate some more on what were the problems and what changed at SAA, cited Mieni, of course, but said that Gigaba too seemed to have gotten himself into a very difficult situation. And this was someone who showed incredible promise as a leader of the ANC Youth League, someone who was incredibly bright. She said he could make no excuse of ignorance or, sort of dim-wittedness, stupidity. This was someone incredibly sharp. And then she tentatively started to talk about his lifestyle and then sort of reined herself in and said she's not going to go into petty-mindedness on that front. But yes, there was this change, Dudu Myeni and then Minister Gigaba leading SAA into a much more difficult and problematic period. And then, what are the fruits of that? Well, we sit now today, almost a decade after Carolus was first appointed to the chair, with the same fuel-efficient airlines and aircraft, which mean that the national carrier is not as competitive as it could have been as a leading air carrier in the African continent and as part of the South African portfolio of businesses.
Let's just quickly throw forward to next week. We were expecting Feki Mentor to return tomorrow, but that's not happening.
No, so we're on a break until it seems Tuesday. It's sort of provisionally set down to resume on Tuesday. We understand that toward the end of next week there may be a witness from Eskom who will be before us, but we don't know who that person is at this point. And Feki Mentor seems will also be facing cross-examination in the new week. So at this point all we know is that we should be resuming come Tuesday.
Just a quick one. Is this cross-examination from the evidence leaders, or is it cross-examination from those who have applied for cross-examination?
Well, I couldn't speak with absolute certainty, but my understanding is that several people implicated in her testimony, including Jacob Zuma, are eager to cross-examine her. They were here the last time she was due to appear, so based on that, I would assess that it's likely it's those implicated, but it probably won't include Fana Hlongwane because she insisted that her lawyers write a letter to the Commission to redact or remove her implicating him, although at first she wasn't sure if it was Brian Hlongo or Fana Hlongwane, so it was all a bit of a muddle to begin with. She says that's no longer the case. She wants to remove that from her testimony.
Well, thank you so much, Erin Bates there. And we will continue, of course, with the coverage of the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, as Erin Bates has indicated that we resume next week, and provisionally that date has been set down for Tuesday.
All right, as it happens, the ENCA team, live for you at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry.